I'm joined today here on Primetime Local News with Samantha Beacott. She is the newly elected president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, and she is also a teacher here in Lloydminster. And you're heading into your first official week as the STF president. So we're here checking in with Samantha to see what some of her priorities are for her one-year term now. Samantha, I see that you've been involved with the STF for a number of years now. Most recently, you were the vice president as of 2019. Talk to me a little bit about why you decided you wanted to run to be the president of the STF.
I felt that it was important for Saskatchewan teachers to have a good representative for them. And being that teachers are about 70% female, I felt that I would be able to represent them well as a young female with two small children in early elementary. So I'd understand their situation pretty easily.
Yeah, it says, I saw in the release that you're the seventh woman to be chosen as president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, and that women in leadership is something that's important to you. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about the value of having women in leadership, especially for a role that you're going to be representing a lot of female teachers, right? There's a lot of women in the teaching profession.
I haven't seen a female as a president within my teaching career. Maybe very early on within my teaching career, there was a female president at the lead of our organization, as well as Gwen Duick as the general secretary or executive director at the time. And so there aren't often many female leaders within higher levels of leadership. Looking at directors of education across the province, there have been fewer female leaders, and then obviously leading our province. We see mostly males within those positions as well. And so for me, I want to be an example that even though you have personal priorities, as I have a young family, that it is possible to change these roles and make them work for your family's situation.
So let's talk a little bit more about the fact that you're a teacher from Lloydminster, and kind of what perspective do you think you're going to bring being a teacher that's, like you said, not coming from that Saskatoon area? What's kind of the different advantage of having someone that's coming from outside of maybe that bubble there?
Well, I think that there are unique challenges in a rural setting, and I know Lloydminster isn't really rural, but we have our own very unique challenges with being on the border and having a charter for our education. And so you bring that perspective with you that you may not see in larger cities. Not to say that larger cities don't have their voice included within the conversation as well, but that's typically the one that you hear a lot of the time.
For a long time, education funding and some of budget cuts that school districts across Saskatchewan are facing is something that the STF has sounded the alarm on for a while. Can you kind of talk about the importance of that and how big of an issue is it right now in Saskatchewan?
Well, we're seeing a lot of divisions being strained within their budgets because of the funding that's been allocated to education right now. And it's hard to make sure that all of the supports that students need are covered when divisions are so strained with their budgets. And so we see a lot of divisions across the province saying that they are already planning on losing upwards of 20 or more teachers. And that has a direct impact on students' lives. When you look at the number of students within each classroom, that's less time that the teacher can spend individually with students. And then on top of that, they're losing some of those specialized supports that they would have had more access to. Maybe it's limited, and maybe they're removing those or that funding for those positions altogether. So it's a big issue because it seems that our funding within education hasn't kept up with inflation. And even without those inflationary costs, if the number of students are increasing, the number or the amount of funding needs to increase with that too. So divisions have been really challenged because they've been expected to use their reserves for a number of years, and now those reserves are drying up for a lot of school divisions across Saskatchewan. And yet that's still the same line we're hearing from our provincial government, is that school divisions need to use their reserves to fund any shortfalls, but that's just not sustainable when you look at budgeting education.
So obviously, education funding is something is a priority for you and the federation. What other things are things that you want to try and work towards or improve during your term this year?
Well, funding impacts so many things, right? Like I said, that's going to impact the classroom and the supports that are available, and the workload of teachers, because when those supports are lost, often teachers step in and fill a role that maybe isn't theirs that they need to fill. And so that is a big priority for me. Aside from that, we are kind of ramping up to bargaining that's going to be starting in the spring. And so that's going to be a priority, is ensuring that the Federation has a clear message going forward into the next year, that teachers know who I am and that I'm connected with all the teachers across the province and understanding their unique circumstances, and what they would like to see going into bargaining.